Khalil Nawaz, a humble janitor at Westridge High School, navigates his daily routine with quiet dignity and profound knowledge that few recognize beneath his maintenance uniform. In the halls of the prestigious school, where science and religion are kept in rigid separation, Khalil's unexpected correction of a biology teacher about embryonic development creates a controversy that threatens the school's delicate social and academic balance. What begins as a janitor being dismissed suddenly transforms into an extraordinary journey of vindication, revealing how ancient wisdom and modern science can illuminate each other, and proving that authentic knowledge transcends titles, borders, and the artificial boundaries we create between different ways of understanding our world. Before we begin, write in the comments where you're listening to our stories from. Subscribe to our channel, it's free and you can always change your mind. Enjoy the story. Chapter 1, An Unexpected Challenge. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as Dr. Richard Harmon pointed to the PowerPoint slide, displaying a grainy black and white image of a human embryo. And here we see the early formation at just 28 days, he announced with the practiced confidence of someone who had given this lecture dozens of times before. Notice how at this stage it's barely distinguishable from the embryo of any other vertebrate. Evolution has left its fingerprints all over our development. The biology classroom fell silent except for the scratching of pens against paper. It was the kind of silence Dr. Harmon had cultivated over 15 years of teaching at Westridge High. A silence born of authority rather than respect. At 45, with his tweed jacket and prematurely a silver hair, he projected the image of academic superiority he'd carefully crafted since earning his doctorate. Absorbed in his lecture, Dr. Harmon almost missed the soft clicking sound coming from the back of the room. Almost. He paused mid-sentence, turning toward the source of the interruption. Khalil Nawaz, the school's newest janitor, was emptying the recycling bin by the door. Unlike the students, Khalil hadn't frozen under Dr. Harmon's gaze. He continued working, seemingly unaware that he disrupted the classroom's carefully maintained atmosphere. Perhaps you could come back after the period ends, Dr. Harmon suggested, making no effort to hide his irritation. We're in the middle of understanding the miracle of human development. 30 pairs of teenage eyes shifted to watch the exchange. Khalil straightened up, his weathered hands resting on the cart handle. "I apologize for the disturbance, doctor," he said in accented English. "The administration asked me to finish this floor before lunch period." Something about the janitor's calm demeanor, his lack of deference, pricked at Dr. Harmon's pride. "Well, now that you've interrupted us," Dr. Harmon said with a tight smile, "perhaps you'd like to tell us what you know about embryonic development, since you seem so interested in our lesson." Laughter rippled through the classroom. This was the Dr. Harmon the students recognized, the one who didn't tolerate disruptions, who used sharp wit to maintain his intellectual territory. A few students even looked embarrassed for Khalil, a man they passed in hallways without really seeing. But Khalil didn't lower his eyes. Instead, he regarded the image on the screen with unexpected interest. "That image," Khalil said quietly, "it looks like what is described in the Quran." The laughter died instantly. Dr. Harmon's eyebrows shot up, his lips parting in surprise before curving into a smirk. "The Quran? You're suggesting a religious text from the 7th century accurately describes embryonic development?" He turned to his students, his voice taking on the theatrical tone he used when debunking pseudoscience. "This should be interesting." He gestured toward the front of the classroom. "Please enlighten us." It was a trap, and everyone knew it. This was Dr. Harmon's arena. Whatever the janitor said next would be dissected and dismissed, becoming tomorrow's cautionary anecdote about the dangers of religious thinking in scientific discourse. Khalil hesitated, glancing at the recycling bin he hadn't finished emptying. Then, with a slight nod, he left his cart by the door and walked to the front of the classroom. The students shifted in their seats, the unexpected drama far more engaging than their typical Friday biology lecture. "In the Quran," Khalil began, his voice gaining strength as he spoke, "the stages of human development are described in detail. It speaks of the nutfa, the alaka, the mudga." "English, please," Dr. Harmon interrupted. "Most of us aren't familiar with Arabic terms." "Of course," Khalil nodded. "The Quran describes how humans start as a drop of fluid, then becomes something that clings like a leech or a blood clot. Then it becomes like a chewed substance with indentations, like teeth marks. Then bones form, and the bones are clothed with flesh." Dr. Harmon's smile widened. This was exactly what he'd expected. Vague, poetic language being retrofitted to match scientific understanding. He'd encountered this type of thinking before. The desperate attempt to reconcile ancient texts with modern knowledge. That's a lovely creation myth, Mr. Nawaz, he said, but those descriptions could apply to almost anything. They're so general they could fit many natural phenomena. That's how these ancient texts work. They're deliberately vague. Khalil didn't appear offended. But that's just it, Doctor. They're not vague at all when you understand the original Arabic. The word alaka has three meanings: something that clings, a blood clot, and a leech-like structure. All three accurately describe the embryo at this stage. He pointed to Dr. Harmon's slide. It clings to the uterine wall, it contains pooled blood, and its shape resembles a leech. Dr. Harmon's smile faded slightly. This wasn't going according to script. And the next stage, mudja, something like chewed substance, Khalil continued. If you look at an embryo around 28 days, the somites on its back look exactly like teeth marks on chewed gum. The Quran describes this over 1,000 years before microscopes existed. A student in the front row, Emma Chen, one of Dr. Harmon's best, raised her hand. "Can I ask a question?" Without waiting for permission, she turned to Khalil. How would anyone in the 7th century know what an embryo looks like? Dr. Harmon relaxed. Leave it to Emma to identify the logical flaw. But Khalil smiled. That's precisely the point. They couldn't have known. According to Islamic belief, this knowledge could only have come from the Creator who designed human development. So your argument is that God told Muhammad about embryology? Dr. Harmon said, not bothering to hide his condescension. That's not a scientific explanation. I'm not offering it as scientific proof of God, Khalil replied. I'm simply pointing out that the Quranic description matches what we now know through science with remarkable accuracy. How that knowledge appeared in a 7th century text is a question worth considering. Before Dr. Harmon could respond, the door to the classroom opened. Principal Diane Foster stood in the doorway, her expression shifting from neutral to confused as she took in the scene. Khalil at the front of the classroom, Dr. Harmon looking increasingly uncomfortable, and 30 students more engaged than she'd ever seen them. Is everything all right here, she asked. Just fine, Diane, Dr. Harmon said quickly. Mr. Nawaz was just leaving. Actually, said Jamal Washington from the back row, he was telling us something interesting about embryos in the Quran. I'd like to hear more. Several students nodded in agreement. Dr. Harmon felt the control of his classroom slipping away. I've taken enough class time, Khalil said, moving toward the door. I should get back to work. Wait, Emma called out. Can you recommend any books or articles about this? For research purposes. Dr. Harmon's jaw tightened. This was getting out of hand. There's a book by Dr. Keith Moore, a prominent embryologist, Khalil said. He compared Quranic descriptions with modern embryology and found the correlations remarkable. Dr. Moore is hardly a definitive source, Dr. Harmon cut in, and this discussion, while interesting, is not part of our curriculum. He turned to Principal Foster. We were just getting back to our lesson. Principal Foster studied the room, sensing the tension. Mr. Nawaz, I believe the 3rd floor still needs attention, she said carefully. Khalil nodded and moved toward his cart. Before leaving, he turned to the class. I apologize for the interruption. Thank you for listening. As the door closed behind him, Dr. Harmon cleared his throat and advanced to the next slide. Now, as I was saying before we were interrupted, but he'd lost them. He could see it in their faces. Where there had been dutiful attention, there was now curiosity, skepticism, engagement. Some were already whispering, others typing into their phones, no doubt looking up Dr. Keith Moore or Quranic embryology or both. Dr. Harmon continued his lecture, but his words felt hollow even to himself. He'd invited the janitor's input as a way to reassert his intellectual dominance, to provide an object lesson in the superiority of scientific thinking over religious belief. Instead, he'd inadvertently sparked a discussion that was spreading through the classroom like wildfire. As the bell rang and students filed out, many still in animated conversation, Dr. Harmon remained at his desk, staring at the embryo still displayed on the screen. For the first time in years, he felt a peculiar sensation, the uncomfortable awareness that he might not have all the answers. Outside in the hallway, Khalil Nawaz quietly continued his work, unaware that the brief classroom encounter had just set in motion events that would extend far beyond the walls of Westridge High. Chapter 2, Ripples of Doubt. By Monday morning, the story had spread throughout Westridge High. Students had a remarkable ability to transmit information, particularly when that information involved a teacher being challenged. In the hallways, the cafeteria, even during passing periods, snippets of conversation floated through the air. Did you hear about Dr. Harmon and the janitor? Apparently, the Quran described embryos before microscopes existed. My cousin looked it up, and that Keith Moore guy is actually legit. He taught at the University of Toronto. Emma Chen sat in the library during her free period, surrounded by open books and her laptop. She'd spent the weekend researching Quranic embryology and Dr. Keith Moore's work. As president of the Science Club and a 3-time state science fair winner, she approached the topic with methodical precision. Find anything interesting? Emma looked up to see Jamal sliding into the chair across from her. Though they shared several AP classes, they rarely spoke outside of group projects. Actually, yes, she replied, turning her laptop toward him. Dr. Moore's book is pretty fascinating. He's a non-Muslim embryologist who was invited to Saudi Arabia in the 1980s to study the embryology references in the Quran. He was apparently quite surprised by the accuracy. Jamal scanned the page. So he's saying it's a miracle? Not exactly, Emma said. He acknowledges the accuracy but doesn't make theological claims. He says it's remarkable, but stops short of saying it's divine revelation, though apparently he did include Quranic descriptions in later editions of his textbook. Interesting, Jamal mused. So what do you think? Coincidence? Lucky guesses? Emma chewed her lip, a habit when she was thinking deeply. I'm not sure. There are several possible explanations. The descriptions could be vague enough to retroactively fit modern knowledge. Or ancient physicians like Galen might have had more anatomical knowledge than we give them credit for, which could have influenced Islamic scholars. But Galen got a lot wrong about embryology, Jamal pointed out, and the Quran doesn't repeat those errors. Emma raised an eyebrow. You've been researching too? Jamal shrugged with a half smile. My mom's a doctor and my dad's an imam. This is basically the intersection of my entire genetic makeup. What does your dad say about it? He sees it as evidence of divine revelation. Mom's more skeptical. She thinks there might be naturalistic explanations we haven't considered. Jamal leaned forward. But what I really want to know is what Dr. Harmon thinks now. He seemed pretty shook on Friday. I have his class next period, Emma said, gathering her books. Guess we'll find out. Dr. Richard Harmon stood at his desk, methodically organizing papers as students filed into the classroom. He'd spent a restless weekend reflecting on Friday's encounter and researching Quranic embryology. What he'd found hadn't settled his mind. Keith Moore was indeed a respected embryologist, not some religious zealot. His comparisons between Quranic descriptions and modern embryology were measured and specific, not the vague pattern matching Dr. Harmon had initially assumed. Even more unsettling were the papers by other Western scientists who had reached similar conclusions. It wasn't the potential religious implications that bothered him. Dr. Harmon considered himself an agnostic, open to evidence in either direction. What troubled him was the possibility that he had dismissed something without proper consideration, that he had allowed his assumptions to override his scientific curiosity. That wasn't the kind of scientist or teacher he aspired to be. As Emma took her seat in the front row, she noticed something different in Dr. Harmon's demeanor. The confident swagger had been replaced by a thoughtful reserve, his usual pre-class banter absent. Before we continue with our unit, Dr. Harmon began once everyone was seated, I want to address what happened on Friday. The classroom fell silent, students exchanging surprised glances. Science progresses through questioning and debate. Sometimes those questions come from unexpected sources. He paused, choosing his next words carefully. While the scientific method remains our best tool for understanding the natural world, we should be careful not to dismiss alternative perspectives without proper consideration. Emma raised her hand. Does that mean you've looked into what Mr. Nawaz said about the Quran and embryology? Dr. Harmon nodded. I have. And while I'm not making any claims about divine revelation, I found the correlations more specific than I initially thought. I've added some optional readings to the class website for those who are interested. A murmur ran through the classroom. This wasn't the Dr. Harmon they knew, the one who drew clear lines between science and religion, who treated the latter as little more than mythology. Now let's return to our regularly scheduled program, he said, clicking to his presentation. Today we're discussing organogenesis, the development of organs in the embryo. As the lecture proceeded, Dr. Harmon noticed something unusual. Nearly every student was paying attention. Not the dutiful, grade-motivated attention he was accustomed to, but genuine engagement. Hands went up with questions that pushed beyond the textbook, making connections he hadn't anticipated. When the bell rang, students lingered, continuing discussions that had sparked during class. Dr. Harmon found himself in the unusual position of having to remind them about their next period. As the room emptied, he sat at his desk, a mix of emotions washing over him. There was discomfort, certainly. He'd been forced to reconsider long-held positions. But there was also an unexpected sense of invigoration. For the first time in years, his classroom felt alive with genuine scientific curiosity. His reflections were interrupted by a knock on the open door. Principal Foster stood in the doorway. "Do you have a minute, Richard?" she asked, her expression unreadable. "Of course, Diane, come in." She closed the door behind her, never a good sign. "I've been getting calls," she said without preamble. "Parents heard about Friday's discussion." Dr. Harmon felt his stomach tighten. "I assume they're concerned about religious content in a science classroom?" "Some are," she agreed. "Others are actually supportive. They see it as academic freedom and critical thinking. The school board is divided." "And where do you stand?" Principal Foster sighed, removing her glasses to rub the bridge of her nose. "Officially, I need to remind you to stick to the approved curriculum. Unofficially, I haven't seen students this engaged in years." She replaced her glasses. "Just tread carefully, Richard. We're in a public school. Give students the facts and tools to think critically, but be mindful of the line between education and endorsement." After she left, Dr. Harmon sat in the empty classroom, the echo of her warning playing in his mind. He had always prided himself on challenging students to think critically, but had he really? Or had he simply been reinforcing his own worldview? The question followed him through his remaining classes, persistent and uncomfortable. Khalil Nawaz swept the empty hallway methodically, his movements efficient after decades of similar work. Before immigrating to America 15 years ago, he had been a professor of comparative religion at Al-Azhar University in Cairo. Now at 62, he cleaned floors and emptied trash at Westridge High, his academic credentials meaningless without U.S. equivalency. He didn't resent the work. There was dignity in all labor. His faith taught him. But sometimes he missed the classroom, the exchange of ideas, the moment when understanding dawned in a student's eyes. "Mr. Nawaz?" He looked up to see Emma and Jamal approaching, backpacks slung over their shoulders. "We wanted to ask you some more about what you said in class," Emma explained. "Dr. Harmon added some readings to our class website, but we have questions." Khalil leaned his broom against the wall. "I'm happy to answer what I can, though I'm no embryologist." "But you were a professor, weren't you?" Jamal asked. "My uncle recognized you from a conference years ago. He said you taught at Al-Azhar." Khalil smiled sadly. "That was another life. Why didn't you say anything when Dr. Harmon challenged you?" Emma asked. "About your background, I mean. Would it have mattered?" Knowledge stands on its own merit, not on the credentials of the speaker. A door opened down the hall and Dr. Harmon emerged from his classroom, briefcase in hand. He paused when he saw the three of them. For a moment, no one spoke. Then Dr. Harmon approached, his expression thoughtful. "Mr. Nawaz," he said, "I've been doing some reading on the topic you raised. I'd be interested in continuing our discussion, if you're willing." Khalil studied the teacher's face, finding none of the condescension from their previous encounter. "I would welcome that, Doctor. Perhaps you could join the science club meeting tomorrow? We're discussing different cultural perspectives on scientific discoveries. Your input would be valuable." "I'll need to check with maintenance about my schedule," Khalil replied. "But I'll try." As Dr. Harmon nodded and continued down the hall, Emma and Jamal exchanged surprised glances. "Did that just happen?" Jamal whispered. "I think it did," Emma replied. Then turning back to Khalil, "You will come, won't you? This could be really interesting." Khalil picked up his broom, resuming his work with the same careful attention as before. "We shall see," he said, though a small smile played at the corners of his mouth. "We shall see." That evening, Dr. Harmon sat in his home office, surrounded by open books and journal articles. His dinner, a microwave meal, sat half-eaten on his desk as he scribbled notes. The phone rang, jarring him from his research. The caller ID displayed his ex-wife's name. "Hello, Margaret," he answered, leaning back in his chair. "Richard, I just got the strangest call from Elise Bradshaw," Margaret said without preamble. She said something about you promoting Islam in your classroom? I told her that couldn't possibly be right. Dr. Harmon sighed. Elise Bradshaw was on the school board and known for her conservative views. I'm not promoting anything. There was a discussion about embryology descriptions in the Quran. It was academically relevant. Since when do you discuss religion as academically relevant? You used to say that was an oxymoron. He couldn't argue with that. Throughout their 15-year marriage, his dismissive attitude toward religion had been a constant source of tension, especially given Margaret's Catholic upbringing. People change, Margaret. He could practically see her skeptical expression through the phone. Well, just a heads up, Elise is rallying support among other board members. She's talking about inappropriate religious content and potential policy violations. Thanks for the warning, he said, genuinely appreciative despite the circumstances of their divorce. Margaret had always been fair, even when he hadn't. After hanging up, Dr. Harmon stared at his notes. Pages of comparative analysis between modern embryological stages and Quranic descriptions. The correlation was remarkable, regardless of how one interpreted its origin. He'd started this research to debunk Khalil's claims, to reassert the primacy of his scientific worldview. But the more he read, the more questions emerged, not just about embryology and ancient texts, but about his own approach to knowledge, to teaching, to the neat categories he'd constructed to organize the world. His phone buzzed with a text message from Emma. Dr. H found more articles about Quranic embryology. Also, Mr. Nawaz confirmed for Science Club tomorrow. This is going to be epic. EC. Dr. Harmon set down his phone, a mixture of anticipation and apprehension settling in his chest. Tomorrow's Science Club meeting would normally have been a routine discussion of the upcoming science fair projects. Now it felt like something much more significant, a collision of worlds he'd long kept separate. Outside his window, a spring storm was brewing, dark clouds gathering on the horizon. It seemed oddly fitting for the unsettled feeling taking root within him, the sense that something fundamental was shifting, that ideas long held as certainties were becoming less solid beneath his feet. Thunder rumbled in the distance as he turned back to his books, determined to be prepared for whatever tomorrow might bring. Chapter 3, The Science Club. The Science Club met every Wednesday after school in Lab 4, the newest laboratory at Westridge High, with gleaming countertops and equipment donated by a local tech company. Usually, attendance hovered around 12 students, mostly juniors and seniors with college applications in mind. Today, every seat was filled, with additional students perched on countertops and leaning against walls. Word had spread about the special guest, and curiosity had drawn in students who'd never before shown interest in extracurricular science. Dr. Harmon surveyed the room with mixed emotions. On one hand, he was pleased to see such engagement. On the other, he worried about turning a scientific discussion into a spectacle. Settle down, everyone, he called over the buzz of conversation. We'll get started in a few minutes. Emma approached his desk, barely containing her excitement. Dr. Harmon, I've prepared some slides summarizing the research I found. Should I set up now or wait until after your introduction? Her enthusiasm was infectious. Despite his concerns about the unusual circumstances, Dr. Harmon couldn't help but appreciate the genuine intellectual curiosity she displayed. Let's wait, he decided. I want to establish some ground rules first. The door opened and conversations halted as Khalil Nawaz entered. He wore the same gray maintenance uniform as always, but there was a subtle difference in his bearing, the slight straightening of shoulders, the confident gaze that swept the room. Small tells that hinted at his former role as an educator. Mr. Nawaz, Dr. Harmon greeted him, extending a hand. Thank you for joining us. Khalil shook the offered hand with a firm grip. Thank you for the invitation, Dr. Harmon. As they moved toward the front of the room, Dr. Harmon noticed Principal Foster slipping in through the back door. Their eyes met briefly, her expression communicating both support and caution. He gave a slight nod, acknowledging the implied message. Proceed, but carefully. Welcome, everyone, Dr. Harmon began, once the room quieted. Before we start, I want to establish what this discussion is and isn't. This is an academic exploration of historical perspectives on embryology, including descriptions found in the Quran. It is not a theological debate or a forum for promoting any particular belief system. He paused, making eye contact with several students. We're here to examine evidence, compare descriptions, and think critically. Questions should be focused on the scientific and historical aspects. Is that clear? Nods rippled through the room. Excellent. Now I've invited Mr. Nawaz to share his knowledge on this topic. For those who don't know, Mr. Nawaz was formerly a professor of comparative religion at Al-Azhar University in Cairo. Murmurs of surprise filled the room. Even those who'd heard rumors about Khalil's background seemed startled by the official confirmation. After Mr. Nawaz gives us some background, Emma Chen will present her research findings, and then we'll open the floor for questions. Dr. Harmon gestured to Khalil. Mr. Nawaz, the floor is yours. Khalil stepped forward, his hands clasped behind his back, the stance of a man accustomed to addressing a classroom. Thank you, Dr. Harmon. His voice, usually soft when exchanging pleasantries in the hallway, now carried throughout the room with clarity and precision. I want to begin by emphasizing that I'm not here to convert anyone or to claim scientific proof of religious beliefs. I'm here to share an interesting historical and textual phenomenon that relates to embryology. He moved to the whiteboard and picked up a marker. With quick, practiced strokes, he wrote several Arabic terms, followed by their transliterations and English translations. The Quran describes human development in several stages, he explained. The first is nutfa, a drop of mixed fluid, then alaka, something that clings, resembles a leech, and has the qualities of a blood clot. Next comes mudga, something like a chewed substance with visible indentations. Then izam, bones, followed by lam, flesh or muscles clothing the bones. Khalil stepped back from the board. What's remarkable is not just the sequence, which corresponds to modern understanding, but the specific imagery used. The term alaka is particularly notable because its three meanings, something that clings, a leech-like structure, and a blood clot, all accurately describe the embryo at that stage. He turned to Dr. Harmon. Perhaps you could show an image of an embryo at around 24 days? Dr. Harmon nodded and clicked to a slide in his prepared presentation. The projector displayed a magnified image of an embryo at the stage Khalil had described. The resemblance to a leech was unmistakable, elongated, curved, with a large head and tail. As you can see, as Khalil continued, the embryo attaches to the uterine wall, resembles a leech in shape, and contains pooled blood. All three meanings of alaka apply. He turned to the next Arabic term on the board. The next stage, muga, literally something like chewed gum with teeth marks, corresponds to the somite stage of development, when somites appear as ridges along the embryo's back, resembling teeth impressions. Dr. Harmon advanced the slide to show this stage, and again the visual correlation was striking. Khalil continued methodically through each stage, pointing out the correspondence between the Quranic terminology and modern embryological understanding. His presentation was clear, measured, and devoid of the emotional appeals or logical leaps that often characterize discussions of religion and science. When he finished, there was a moment of silence before Emma raised her hand. Mr. Nawaz, could you explain when these descriptions were written and what was known about embryology at that time? The Quran was revealed in the 7th century CE, Khalil replied. The predominant embryological understanding at that time came from Greek physicians like Galen and Hippocrates, whose work contained significant errors. They believed, for instance, that the embryo was formed from menstrual blood mixed with male semen and developed all at once rather than in stages. So the Quranic description differs from the scientific understanding of its time? Emma pressed. Significantly, Khalil confirmed. And it presents development as a sequence of distinct stages, which wasn't established scientifically until the 19th and 20th centuries, with the work of embryologists like von Baer and his. Emma stood and moved to the front with her laptop. That connects perfectly with what I found, she said, plugging into the projector. May I? Khalil nodded and took a seat in the front row as Emma displayed her slides. I've been researching what Dr. Keith Moore wrote about this topic, she began. For those who don't know, Moore was a prominent embryologist who authored The Developing Human, a textbook used in medical schools worldwide. She clicked to a slide showing quotes from Moore's work. When Moore was invited to Saudi Arabia in the 1980s to study these Quranic descriptions, he stated that, "It is clear to me that these statements must have come to Muhammad from God, because almost all of this knowledge was not discovered until many centuries later." Emma glanced at Dr. Harmon, perhaps concerned about veering into theological territory, but he nodded for her to continue. More later included references to the Quranic terminology in the special editions of his textbook. He wasn't the only Western scientist to examine this. Professor Marshall Johnson, former director of the Daniel Ball Institute, noted that the Quran describes human development from fertilization to organogenesis with remarkable accuracy. She advanced through several more slides, showing comparisons between modern embryological illustrations and the Quranic terminology. What I found most interesting, she concluded, is that these correlations aren't vague or post hoc interpretations. The Arabic terms are quite specific and descriptive. As Emma returned to her seat, hands shot up around the room. Dr. Harmon called on Jamal first. "This is a question for both Dr. Harmon and Mr. Nawaz," Jamal said. "From a philosophical perspective, how do we approach this kind of phenomenon? If an ancient text contains scientifically accurate information that wasn't empirically verifiable at the time, what explanations should we consider?" The question hung in the air, complex and challenging. Dr. Harmon appreciated its thoughtfulness. It addressed the core issue without forcing a false dichotomy between science and religion. "That's an excellent question," he began. "Scientifically, we have to consider multiple hypotheses. One possibility is that the correlations are coincidental or the result of vague language that happens to fit modern understanding. Another is that there might have been observational knowledge, perhaps from miscarriages or animal dissections, that informed these descriptions." He paused, aware of the tension between his scientific training and the evidence before him. "A third possibility is that there were insights or understanding beyond what the scientific method can currently explain. As scientists, we shouldn't dismiss evidence simply because it doesn't fit our preconceptions." "If I may add," Khalil said, "from a philosophical standpoint, this touches on the limits of empiricism. Science excels at answering how questions, but often struggles with why questions. Perhaps there are forms of knowledge transmission that our current epistemological framework doesn't fully account for." The discussion continued, spiraling into questions about the philosophy of science, the history of embryology, and the relationship between religious texts and natural phenomena. Dr. Harmon found himself moderating an intellectual exchange far more nuanced and engaging than he had anticipated. From her position near the back door, Principal Foster observed with growing approval. Despite the potentially controversial subject matter, the discussion remained academic and respectful. Students were thinking critically, asking insightful questions, and engaging with complex ideas that crossed traditional disciplinary boundaries. After nearly an hour, she slipped out as quietly as she had entered, making a mental note to inform the concerned school board members that the science club was functioning exactly as it should, fostering intellectual curiosity and critical thinking. The discussion might have continued indefinitely if the custodial supervisor hadn't appeared at the door, pointedly checking his watch. Khalil noticed immediately and rose from his seat. "I'm afraid I must return to my duties," he said apologetically. "Before you go," Dr. Harmon said, "I want to thank you for sharing your knowledge with us. This has been one of the most stimulating discussions we've had in Science Club." A round of applause followed Khalil as he left, several students trailing after him with additional questions. As the room gradually emptied, Dr. Harmon began clearing the whiteboard, his mind still processing the afternoon's exchange. "That went well," Emma said, helping gather handouts. "Better than I expected, actually." "How so?" Dr. Harmon asked. "I thought it might turn into a debate about religion versus science," she admitted, "but it was more like science and philosophy and history all working together." Dr. Harmon nodded. "The best scientific discussions often cross disciplinary boundaries." "So what happens now?" she asked, her expression suddenly serious. "I mean, this was interesting for one meeting, but it's not really part of our curriculum, is it?" The question gave Dr. Harmon pause. What did happen now? The discussion had opened intellectual doors he hadn't anticipated, raising questions about how he taught science and the artificial boundaries he'd constructed between disciplines. "I'm not sure," he answered honestly, "but I think we've all got some thinking to do." As Emma left, Dr. Harmon sat alone in the lab, making notes about the discussion while it was still fresh in his mind. He was so absorbed that he didn't notice Principal Foster until she pulled up a chair beside him. "Quite a session," she remarked. "Were you there the whole time?" he asked, surprised. "Enough to get a sense of it." She studied him thoughtfully. "This isn't what I expected when I warned you to be careful, Richard. Is that good or bad?" "Good, I think. Those students were engaged in real critical thinking, not just memorizing facts for a test. She hesitated, but not everyone sees it that way. I've received more calls, including several from board members. Dr. Harmon sighed. Margaret warned me. Elise Bradshaw, among others. They're concerned about religious content in a science classroom. It was an academic discussion about historical descriptions of embryological development, he pointed out. The religious context is relevant, but not the focus. You and I know that, Principal Foster agreed. But perception matters in public education. The board is calling a special meeting tomorrow evening to discuss curriculum concerns. That was fast. Small towns, Richard. Word travels. She stood to leave. I'll defend your academic freedom, but be prepared for questions. They'll want to know why you've suddenly introduced this topic and where you plan to take it. After she left, Dr. Harmon remained at his desk, the empty laboratory feeling unusually cavernous. The truth was, he didn't have clear answers to those questions. His encounter with Khalil had sparked something unexpected. A re-examination of his approach to science education, to knowledge itself. For years, he taught embryology as a purely mechanistic process, emphasizing how natural selection had shaped developmental pathways over millions of years. That perspective wasn't wrong, but he now wondered if it was incomplete. Were there other valid ways of understanding and contextualizing scientific knowledge? His phone buzzed with a text from a number he didn't recognize. Dr. Harmon, this is Khalil Nawaz. I wanted to thank you for the opportunity to speak with your students today. If you're interested, I have some books on the history of embryology across different cultures that might provide additional context for your curriculum. No pressure, of course. Dr. Harmon stared at the message, a complex mix of emotions washing over him. Professional curiosity, certainly, but also a humbling awareness that he'd underestimated the janitor, had dismissed him based on his current occupation, rather than recognizing the depth of knowledge he possessed. I'd appreciate that, he texted back. Perhaps we could meet before school tomorrow? The reply came quickly. 7:30 in the library works for me. As Dr. Harmon gathered his materials and turned off the laboratory lights, he felt a strange sense of anticipation. For the first time in years, he was stepping beyond the comfortable boundaries of his expertise, entering intellectual territory that was unfamiliar and challenging. It was discomforting, but also, he had to admit, deeply invigorating. The library at 7:30 a.m. was typically deserted, with even the librarian not due until 8 in Osho. Dr. Harmon found Khalil already there, a stack of books on the table before him. Good morning, Khalil greeted him. I hope these will be useful. Dr. Harmon settled into a chair and examined the titles. Medicine and Faith in Early Islam, A History of Embryology in Islamic Culture, Comparative Anatomy in Ancient Texts, Scholarly Works, Not Religious Apologetics. These look fascinating, he said sincerely. I appreciate you sharing them. Knowledge is meant to be shared, Khalil replied simply. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Dr. Harmon asked the question that had been nagging at him. May I ask how you went from being a professor to a janitor? Khalil finished with a gentle smile. It's a common immigrant story. My credentials weren't recognized, and at my age, returning to school seemed impractical. My family needed stability, so I took the work I could find. That must have been difficult. It was an adjustment, Khalil acknowledged. But there is dignity in all honest work, and occasionally there are unexpected opportunities to share knowledge. Dr. Harmon felt a pang of guilt, remembering his initial dismissiveness. I owe you an apology for my attitude when you first spoke up in class. I made assumptions based on your job, not your knowledge. Apology accepted, Khalil said warmly. Though in fairness, you had no way of knowing my background. Still, I should have engaged with your ideas on their merits, regardless of their source. That's basic intellectual integrity. Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Emma and Jamal, both looking surprised to find the library occupied. Dr. Harmon, Mr. Nawaz, Emma greeted them. We were just coming to do some research before class. On embryology? Dr. Harmon guessed. Actually, we're working on something bigger, Jamal said. After yesterday's discussion, we thought it would be interesting to look at other examples of scientific information in ancient texts, not just Islamic, but across different cultures. We're thinking of making it our science fair project, Emma added, a comparative analysis of ancient knowledge and modern scientific understanding, with a focus on how different cultures observed and recorded natural phenomena. Dr. Harmon was impressed by their initiative. That's an ambitious project. It crosses into history, anthropology, and linguistics. Exactly. Emma's eyes lit up. Science doesn't exist in isolation. It's part of human culture and history. Yesterday made me realize how much we miss by studying subjects in separate boxes. As they discussed potential approaches to the project, more students began filtering into the library, many stopping to join the conversation. What had started as a private meeting was evolving into an impromptu study group, with books being pulled from shelves and notes being compared. From across the room, the newly arrived librarian observed with a mix of confusion and approval. It wasn't often that students voluntarily gathered to discuss academic topics before the first bell. The growing buzz was interrupted by an announcement over the intercom. "Dr. Harmon, please report to the main office." "Dr. Harmon to the main office." He exchanged a glance with Khalil, both recognizing the unusual timing of the summons. "I should go," he said, gathering his belongings. "May I borrow these books?" "Of course," Khalil replied. "And if you have questions, I'm usually in the East Wing during third period." As Dr. Harmon made his way to the office, he couldn't shake a sense of foreboding. Early morning calls to the office rarely brought good news. His suspicion was confirmed when he found Principal Foster waiting with a grim expression, her office door open. "The board called an emergency session last night," she said without preamble once he'd entered and closed the door. "They're concerned about what they're calling religious advocacy in your classroom." "That's absurd," Dr. Harmon protested. "It was an academic discussion about historical descriptions of embryological development. We looked at evidence and compared textual descriptions with modern understanding." "I know that," Principal Foster said. "I was there, remember? But several board members are portraying it as promoting Islamic beliefs in a science classroom. That's not what happened. Some parents are concerned that their children came home asking questions about the Quran," she continued. "In their view, that crosses a line." Dr. Harmon felt a surge of frustration. "So it's fine for students to learn about Aristotle's or Galen's views on embryology, but not Islamic scholars? That's a double standard." "I agree," Principal Foster said, surprising him. "And I told the board exactly that. But politics is involved now, Richard. The board is split, and there's talk of maintaining appropriate boundaries between science and religion." What does that mean for me?" "For now, they're requesting that you stick strictly to the approved curriculum until the matter is resolved. No more discussions of religious texts in relation to scientific topics. And the science club? Temporarily suspended pending review." She held up a hand to forestall his protest. "I fought this, Richard, but I was outvoted." Dr. Harmon sat back, processing the implications. "This feels like a violation of academic freedom." "It is," she agreed. "But it's also the reality of public education in a politically divided community. The formal board meeting is tomorrow evening. I suggest you prepare a statement clarifying the academic nature of the discussion and your pedagogical approach." As he left the office, the first bell rang, signaling 5 minutes until classes began. Students streamed through the hallways, among them several from yesterday's science club meeting who greeted him with newfound enthusiasm. Their engagement was exactly what he'd always hoped for as an educator. Students thinking critically, making connections across disciplines, pursuing knowledge for its own sake rather than for grades. The irony that this success had led to administrative censure wasn't lost on him. When he reached his classroom, he found Emma waiting outside, her expression concerned. "Is everything okay, Dr. Harmon?" she asked. "You were called to the office." "Just some administrative matters," he said, not wanting to burden her with the situation. "Nothing for you to worry about." She didn't look convinced. "It's about the science club discussion, isn't it? My mom said she heard people talking about it at the grocery store. Some parents are upset." Dr. Harmon sighed. There was no point in pretending. "There are some concerns about the topics we discussed. The board is reviewing the situation." "But we didn't do anything wrong," Emma protested. "We looked at evidence, compared different perspectives, and had an academic discussion. Isn't that what science is supposed to be about?" "It is," he agreed, "and that's what I'll explain to the board. For now, though, Science Club is temporarily suspended, and we need to focus on the standard curriculum." Emma's shoulders slumped. "So we just pretend yesterday never happened? Go back to memorizing stages of development without asking any deeper questions?" Her disappointment struck a chord in Dr. Harmon. It reflected his own frustration with the constraints being imposed. constraints that seemed to contradict the very spirit of scientific inquiry he had dedicated his career to fostering. "No," he said finally. "We continue learning and thinking critically. The official curriculum is just a starting point, not the end of knowledge." The warning bell rang, and students began filing into the classroom. Emma gave him a searching look before taking her seat. "What are you going to do?" It was a question Dr. Harmon was still asking himself. "Teach," he said simply, "the best way I know how." As he turned to write the day's topic on the board, he was acutely aware that the best way had suddenly become far more complicated than it had been just a few days ago. By lunchtime, word had spread about the science club's suspension. Students gathered in small groups throughout the cafeteria, conversations buzzing with unusual intensity for a Thursday. At the teacher's table, opinions were similarly divided. "It's ridiculous," said Amara Okafor, the calculus teacher. "Since when is comparative analysis of historical scientific understanding controversial?" "Since it involved religion," replied Tom Winters from English literature. "You can quote Shakespeare's biblical references all day, but mention the Quran in a science class, and suddenly it's an issue." "It's more complicated than that," Sandra Miller from Social Studies interjected. "There are legitimate concerns about separation of church and state in public schools." "But they weren't promoting religion," Amara countered. "From what I heard, they were analyzing descriptive language about embryonic development in an ancient text and comparing it with modern understanding. That's interdisciplinary education at its finest." Dr. Harmon listened to the debate without contributing, grateful for Amara's support, but aware that the situation had layers his colleagues weren't seeing. This wasn't just about one classroom discussion. It was about challenging the boundaries between disciplines, questioning the unspoken assumptions that shape science education. His thoughts were interrupted by a tap on his shoulder. Principal Foster stood behind him, her expression serious. "A moment, Richard." He followed her to a quiet corner of the cafeteria. "I just got off the phone with Superintendent Davis," she said in a low voice. "The situation has escalated. Someone recorded parts of yesterday's science club meeting and shared it on social media." "What?" Dr. Harmon felt his stomach drop. "Who would? It doesn't matter who. What matters is that selected clips are circulating that make it sound like you and Mr. Nawaz were promoting Islamic beliefs as scientifically proven. That's a complete misrepresentation." "I know that," Principal Foster said, frustration evident in her voice. "But context gets lost in 30-second clips. The comment section is already a battleground between those calling for your resignation and those defending academic freedom." Dr. Harmon closed his eyes briefly, processing the implications. "What does the superintendent want?" "He's suggesting you take voluntary leave while the board investigates." "Paid or unpaid?" "Paid. He's not assuming wrongdoing, just trying to defuse the situation." Dr. Harmon felt a surge of anger. "So I'm being punished for encouraging critical thinking? For allowing students to explore connections between cultural history and science?" "No one's saying you did anything wrong," Principal Foster emphasized. "But public education is inherently political, especially in a town like ours. The superintendent is trying to prevent this from becoming a larger controversy by silencing the discussion, by creating space for proper review rather than knee-jerk reactions." She placed a hand on his arm. "Take the leave, Richard. Let me work with the board to clarify what actually happened. If you fight this now, it becomes about you rather than about academic freedom and interdisciplinary education." He knew she was right, but the concession felt bitter. After 20 years of teaching, his professional judgment was being questioned over what had been, in his view, one of the most successful educational experiences he'd facilitated. "What about Mr. Nawaz?" he asked. "Is he being asked to take leave too?" "No," Principal Foster admitted. "As a maintenance employee, he's not seen as having the same influence or responsibility over curriculum." The double standard was glaring, but Dr. Harmon chose not to point it out. Khalil had already faced enough professional setbacks. He didn't need to become further embroiled in this controversy. "Fine," he conceded. "I'll take the leave, but I want to address my classes first." Principal Foster hesitated, then nodded. "One class period each. Stick to saying you're taking temporary leave for personal reasons. No details about the controversy." As she walked away, Dr. Harmon remained in the corner, watching the cafeteria hum with activity. Students laughing, arguing, sharing ideas, the vibrant ecosystem of learning he'd dedicated his life to nurturing. Now he was being asked to step away. to pause his contribution to that ecosystem because he dared to expand its boundaries. The irony wasn't lost on him. In trying to foster true critical thinking, the willingness to question assumptions and consider diverse perspectives, he'd run afoul of the very institutional structures that claim to value such thinking. He spotted Khalil across the cafeteria, quietly cleaning a table while seemingly oblivious to the conversation swirling around him. But Dr. Harmon noticed how students who would have previously ignored the janitor now acknowledged him with nods or brief exchanges. Something had shifted in the school's social hierarchy, small but significant. As the bell rang, signaling the end of lunch, Dr. Harmon made a decision. His leave might be inevitable, but how he used it was still within his control. This controversy had revealed something important about the limitations of how science was taught and understood in public education. Perhaps there was an opportunity here, not just to defend his actions, but to advocate for a more integrated, holistic approach to knowledge. With renewed purpose, he headed to his next class, already planning how to use this unexpected free time to deepen his understanding of the very issues that had landed him in this situation. Chapter 4. Beyond the Classroom. The morning after Dr. Harmon began his administrative leave, Westridge High buzzed with speculation. For students accustomed to his authoritative presence in the biology department, his sudden absence felt jarring. Official communications had been vague. A brief email to parents mentioned only that Dr. Harmon was taking temporary leave and that Ms. Jensen, the assistant biology teacher, would be covering his classes. But in the age of social media, official silence only fueled unofficial narratives. "I heard he got fired for teaching Islam instead of science," whispered a freshman to his friend as they passed the biology lab. "That's not what happened," Emma Chen interjected, overhearing the comment. "It was an academic discussion comparing historical descriptions of embryology with modern understanding." "Then why is he gone?" the freshman challenged. Emma had no good answer for that. By third period, competing narratives had crystallized. Some portrayed Dr. Harmon as a victim of religious censorship, others as inappropriately bringing religion into a science classroom. The video clips circulating online, selectively edited and stripped of context, allowed people to see what they wanted to see. For Khalil Nawaz, the controversy manifested in curious glances and hushed conversations that stopped when he entered a room. As he went about his cleaning duties, he felt the weight of these unspoken judgments. It was an unwelcome reminder of his first years in America, when his accent and appearance had sometimes made him an object of suspicion rather than a full participant in his adopted country. During his lunch break, he retreated to the quiet sanctuary of the maintenance room, where he could eat without being observed. As he unwrapped his sandwich, the door opened and Principal Foster entered. "Mr. Nawaz," she said, "may I speak with you for a moment?" "Of course," he gestured to the small table. "Please join me." Principal Foster sat, her posture betraying the strain of the past 24 hours. "I wanted to check how you're doing with all this attention." "I'm fine," Khalil assured her, touched by her concern. "This is not my first experience with being misunderstood. I'm sorry about that." She sighed deeply. "This situation has been badly mishandled, and I want you to know that I don't hold you responsible in any way. You were invited to speak to the science club, and you did so appropriately and academically." "Thank you," Khalil said. "But I am concerned about Dr. Harmon. His career seems to be at risk over what was, in my view, an exemplary teaching moment." Principal Foster's expression tightened. "The situation is complicated. There are political dimensions that extend beyond the school itself. The board is divided, and community opinions are strong on both sides. And in such situations, it is easier to remove the perceived source of controversy than to address the underlying issues," Khalil observed without rancor. "Unfortunately, yes." She met his gaze directly. "I need to ask you to maintain a low profile while this plays out. Continue your work as usual, but perhaps avoid engaging with students on this topic, even if they approach you." Khalil nodded slowly. "I understand your position. I will respect your request." After she left, Khalil sat in contemplative silence, reflecting on the strange turns his life had taken. For years, he had mourned the loss of his academic role, the opportunity to shape young minds and contribute to scholarly discourse. Now, ironically, a brief return to that role had created ripples far beyond what he could have anticipated. He finished his lunch and returned to his cart, moving through the hallways with practiced efficiency. As he passed Dr. Harmon's classroom, he glanced inside to see Miss Jensen struggling to manage a class, clearly testing the boundaries of a substitute teacher's authority. The contrast with the engaged, intellectually curious students from the science club meeting was stark. Something valuable had been kindled in that discussion. Something that transcended the artificial boundaries between disciplines, between faith and reason, between the janitor and the doctor of philosophy. To let that spark be extinguished by bureaucratic caution and political maneuvering seemed a profound educational loss. As Khalil continued his rounds, a resolution began to form in his mind. He could not return to the classroom at Westridge High, but perhaps there were other ways to nurture the intellectual curiosity that had been awakened. Dr. Richard Harmon sat in his home office, surrounded by books and scientific journals spread across his desk. 3 days into his administrative leave, he had transformed the space into a research center focused on the historical intersection of science and religious thought. His current focus, the work of Ibn al-Nafis, a 13th century physician who had correctly described pulmonary circulation centuries before William Harvey, received credit for the discovery. The doorbell interrupted his "Enjoying our stories? Don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you won't miss any of our upcoming content." Now let's get back to our story. The doorbell interrupted his reading. When he opened the front door, he found Emma and Jamal standing on his porch, accompanied by 4 other students from the science club. "Dr. Harmon," Emma began without preamble, "we want to continue the discussion that started in science club." "I'm on administrative leave," he reminded them. "I can't conduct school activities." "This isn't a school activity," Jamal countered. "This is 6 students visiting a community member with shared intellectual interests, completely unofficial." Dr. Harmon couldn't help but smile at the technicality. "I see. And how did you find my address?" "School directory," Emma said. "It's publicly available to families." He studied the group, some of his most academically motivated students, now showing the kind of intellectual initiative that teachers dream about but rarely encounter. To turn them away would contradict everything he believed about nurturing critical thinking and curiosity. "Come in," he decided, standing aside. "But understand that this is not a class, and I'm not acting in my capacity as your teacher." They filed into his living room, taking seats on couches and the floor. Emma produced a notebook filled with questions and observations stemming from their initial discussion about embryology in the Quran. "We've been researching independently," she explained. "Jamal found references to pulmonary circulation in Islamic medical texts from the 13th century. Tyler discovered ancient Chinese anatomical knowledge that predated Western understanding. And I've been analyzing the language used to describe embryonic development across different cultures. We thought about forming our own independent study group," Jamal added, "but we kept hitting walls without proper guidance. There's so much information that it's hard to know what's academically sound versus what's biased or pseudoscientific." Dr. Harmon felt a surge of pride mixed with concern. Their initiative was admirable, but the situation remained delicate. "I appreciate your enthusiasm, but you need to understand the complexity of the situation. There are legitimate questions about how religious perspectives should be addressed in public education." "But this isn't about promoting religion," Emma argued. "It's about examining how different cultures have contributed to scientific understanding. Why is it controversial to acknowledge that Islamic scholars preserved and advanced scientific knowledge during the European Dark Ages? Or that Chinese medicine had insights about circulation and anatomy before Western medicine?" Tyler added. "It's controversial because it challenges established narratives," Dr. Harmon explained. "Science education often presents a linear progression from Greek thought to the European Enlightenment to modern Western science, overlooking contributions from other cultures and traditions." "That seems like bad science," Jamal observed, "ignoring evidence because it doesn't fit your preferred narrative." "It is," Dr. Harmon agreed, "but science doesn't exist in a vacuum. It's practiced within social and political contexts that shape what questions are asked, what evidence is valued, and whose contributions are recognized." For the next 2 hours, they engaged in exactly the kind of interdisciplinary exploration that had been cut short at school, examining historical texts, discussing the philosophy of science, and considering how cultural contexts influence scientific development. Dr. Harmon found himself learning alongside his students, their combined curiosity driving deeper analysis than would have been possible in a traditional classroom setting. As the impromptu session wound down, Emma raised the question that had been hovering unspoken. What happens when you go back to school? Will you still be able to teach like this? Dr. Harmon considered the question carefully. I don't know, he admitted, but this experience has made me reconsider how science should be taught. We lose something valuable when we present science as a collection of settled facts rather than an ongoing process of inquiry that spans cultures and traditions. So what can we do? Tyler asked. Just wait for the board to decide your fate and hope for the best? Before Dr. Harmon could respond, his phone buzzed with a text message. It was from Khalil. Several students have approached me with questions about our discussion. I've respected Principal Foster's request to maintain distance, but I believe these young minds deserve continued engagement with these ideas. Perhaps there's a way forward that doesn't involve the school directly? I have a colleague at the community center who might be interested in hosting a discussion series. Dr. Harmon looked from the message to the expectant faces before him. These students had taken the initiative to continue their learning outside official channels. They demonstrated precisely the kind of intellectual autonomy that education should foster. To discourage that seemed contrary to his fundamental mission as a teacher, regardless of his employment status. Actually, he said slowly, there might be another approach, not through the school, but through the community. The Riverside Community Center had seen better days. Built in the 1970s, its brick facade was weathered, and the sign above the entrance had faded under decades of sun exposure. Yet on Saturday morning, cars filled its small parking lot, and a steady stream of people made their way inside. In the main meeting room, chairs had been arranged in a semicircle facing a small table at the front. Dr. Harmon stood near the entrance, watching with amazement as the seats filled, not just with his students, but with parents, community members, and even a few teachers from Westridge High, including Amara Okafor from the math department. This is quite a turnout, she remarked, joining him by the door. Your suspension has become something of a cause célèbre. That wasn't my intention, Dr. Harmon said, discomfort mixing with pride at the community response. I know, but sometimes these things take on a life of their own. She nodded toward the back of the room where Principal Foster had just entered, attempting to remain inconspicuous. Even the administration is curious. At the front of the room, Khalil conferred with a middle-aged woman in a hijab, Dr. Layla Fawaz, a professor of medical history from the nearby community college, who had agreed to co-moderate the discussion series with Dr. Harmon. Her expertise bridged the historical contributions of Islamic civilization to medical science, making her the perfect partner for this interdisciplinary exploration. As the clock struck 10, Khalil approached the microphone. The room quieted immediately. Welcome to the first session of Perspectives on Science, a cross-cultural exploration, he began. I am Khalil Nawaz, and along with Dr. Richard Harmon and Dr. Layla Fawaz, I will be facilitating this community discussion series. He paused, surveying the diverse crowd. What began as a classroom conversation has evolved into something larger, an opportunity to explore how different cultures and traditions have contributed to our understanding of the natural world. Dr. Harmon watched from the side, struck by Khalil's natural authority and presence. The maintenance uniform was gone, replaced by a crisp button-down shirt and slacks. But the transformation went deeper than clothing. Here, outside the hierarchical structure of Westridge High, Khalil had reclaimed his identity as an educator, his dignity as a knowledge bearer. Today's session will focus on the history of embryology across different cultures, Khalil continued. We'll examine how ancient texts described human development, how those descriptions compare with modern understanding, and what this tells us about the transmission of knowledge through history. He gestured to Dr. Fawaz, who rose to join him. Dr. Fawaz will provide historical context on medical knowledge in the Islamic Golden Age, while Dr. Harmon will connect these historical perspectives to contemporary embryological science. As Dr. Harmon moved to the front of the room, he caught Emma's eye in the front row. She gave him a subtle thumbs up, her expression reflecting the same excitement he felt. The thrill of intellectual exploration, unconstrained by artificial disciplinary boundaries. The session unfolded with a dynamic energy unlike anything he'd experienced in a traditional classroom. Questions came from all directions. A local pastor asked about biblical descriptions of fetal development. A medical student compared ancient Chinese and Greek embryological theories. A parent wondered how to address these cross-cultural perspectives with younger children. Throughout it all, Dr. Harmon, Khalil, and Dr. Fawaz maintained the academic focus, steering discussions away from theological claims while honoring the historical and cultural contexts of different knowledge traditions. When points of tension arose, as they inevitably did when discussing the intersection of science and religion, they modeled respectful engagement with differing perspectives. From her position near the back, Principal Foster observed with growing interest. She had come partly out of professional concern, wanting to ensure that the controversy didn't escalate further. But as the discussion progressed, she found herself intellectually engaged in a way that reminded her why she'd entered education in the first place. This was learning in its purest form. Not the standardized, compartmentalized, test-oriented version that administrative demands had created, but the organic, curiosity-driven exploration of ideas that crossed conventional boundaries. The energy in the room was palpable, with participants building on each other's insights and forming connections between seemingly disparate areas of knowledge. When the 2-hour session ended, people lingered, continuing conversations in small groups. Principal Foster made her way to the front, where Dr. Harmon was gathering his materials. "That was quite impressive," she said, genuine admiration in her voice. "You've created something valuable here." "We have," he corrected, gesturing to include Khalil and Dr. Fawaz. "It's been a collaborative effort." "The board meeting is Monday evening," she informed him. "They'll make a decision about your status with the school. And what will you recommend?" She considered the question carefully. "That they attend next Saturday's session before deciding. What happened here today was education at its finest, the kind we aspire to but rarely achieve within institutional constraints." As Principal Foster moved away to speak with Dr. Fawaz, Khalil joined Dr. Harmon at the table. "A successful beginning," Khalil observed, "though I suspect not everyone will be pleased." Dr. Harmon nodded toward the entrance where a small group had gathered, their expressions less enthusiastic than the majority. Among them, he recognized Elise Bradshaw from the school board, her arms crossed defensively as she spoke with another board member. "No," he agreed, "but that's the nature of meaningful education. It challenges existing perspectives and creates discomfort. The question is whether that discomfort leads to growth or to entrenchment." "Indeed." Khalil gathered his notes thoughtfully. "In my experience, the most significant learning often happens in that space of discomfort, when we're forced to reconsider assumptions we didn't even know we were making." Dr. Harmon reflected on how profoundly his own assumptions had been challenged over the past week. About science education, about religious texts, about the man standing beside him. What had begun as an unwelcome interruption to his classroom routine had evolved into a transformative reassessment of his approach to teaching and knowledge itself. "Next week's topic is the history of astronomical observation across cultures," Khalil reminded him. Dr. Fawaz suggested we include ancient Mayan and Egyptian contributions, alongside the better-known Greek and Islamic traditions. "Perfect," Dr. Harmon nodded. "I'll research the historical development of celestial navigation techniques. There's fascinating material about how Pacific Islanders used wave patterns and star positions for long-distance navigation." As they continued planning, Dr. Harmon noticed Emma, Jamal, and several other students gathering nearby, clearly waiting to speak with them. Their expressions held a mixture of excitement and determination that he recognized immediately. The look of minds awakened to new possibilities, eager to explore further. "I think our students have ideas of their own to contribute," he observed. Khalil smiled warmly. "They always do when given the space to develop them." Together, they moved to include the waiting students in their planning, the hierarchical distinction between teacher and student, professor and janitor, blurring in the shared pursuit of understanding. Whatever the school board decided on Monday, something important had already been achieved. A model of education that transcended institutional boundaries and honored knowledge in all its diverse forms and sources. Monday evening found Dr. Harmon sitting in the back row of the school board meeting, watching as community members approached the microphone during the public comment period. The meeting had been moved from its usual location to the school auditorium to accommodate the unprecedented attendance. Speaker after speaker addressed the controversy, opinions sharply divided. Some condemned what they called religious indoctrination in science classrooms. Others defended academic freedom and interdisciplinary education. Through it all, Dr. Harmon maintained a composed expression, though internally he was struck by how differently people had perceived the same events. When Elise Bradshaw spoke, her voice carried the weight of moral certainty. Science classrooms should teach science, not religion. It's a matter of maintaining appropriate boundaries in public education. Minutes later, Rabbi David Goldstein offered a counterpoint. Knowledge doesn't exist in neat compartments. Understanding the historical development of scientific ideas necessarily involves cultural and, yes, sometimes religious contexts. That's not indoctrination, it's comprehensive education. As the public comments concluded, Superintendent Davis called Dr. Harmon to address the board directly. Walking to the microphone, he felt the weight of dozens of eyes following his progress. Among the faces in the crowd, he spotted Khalil sitting quietly near the middle, offering a subtle nod of encouragement. Members of the board, Dr. Harmon began, I stand before you not to defend any theological position, but to advocate for an approach to education that honors the complex, interconnected nature of human knowledge. He spoke for precisely the allotted 5 minutes, outlining his pedagogical philosophy and addressing the misconceptions that had arisen from the selectively edited video clips. He emphasized that the discussion had focused on the historical accuracy of embryological descriptions, not on theological claims about their origin. In conclusion, he said, I believe we do our students a disservice when we present science as a body of facts isolated from its historical and cultural context. True scientific thinking involves questioning assumptions, considering diverse perspectives, and recognizing that knowledge has evolved through contributions from many civilizations and traditions. As he returned to his seat, the board president announced that they would now deliberate and vote on Dr. Harmon's employment status. The tension in the room was palpable as board members engaged in hushed discussions. Finally, the board president called for a vote. One by one, members stated their positions. Given the divisive nature of this situation, I vote for termination. Dr. Harmon has an exemplary teaching record. I vote for reinstatement. I vote for continued suspension pending further investigation. The tally proceeded, evenly split until only Principal Foster remained. As an ex officio member of the board, her vote carried significant weight. Having observed both the original discussion and Saturday's community session, she said deliberately, I've seen firsthand the educational value of Dr. Harmon's approach. Moreover, attendance and engagement in his classes have markedly increased since these events began. She paused, meeting Dr. Harmon's gaze across the room. I vote for immediate reinstatement with the suggestion that we consider incorporating more interdisciplinary perspectives into our curriculum across departments. With that, the vote stood at 4-3 in favor of reinstatement. Dr. Harmon felt a wave of relief, though it was tempered by awareness of the deep divisions the controversy had revealed. As the meeting adjourned, people gathered in clusters, reactions mixed. Some approached to congratulate him, while others turned away in evident disappointment. Emma and her parents made their way through the crowd to his side. Congratulations, Dr. Harmon, Mr. Chen said, extending his hand. I'm pleased the board made the right decision, though I'm not sure this resolves the underlying issues, Mrs. Chen added thoughtfully. The community remains divided on how to approach these interdisciplinary questions. You're right, Dr. Harmon acknowledged. This vote was about my employment, not about the larger educational questions we've been exploring. That's why the Saturday sessions are so important, Emma interjected. They create space for these discussions outside the political constraints of the school system. Dr. Harmon nodded in agreement, spotting Khalil making his way toward the exit. Excuse me for a moment, he said to the Chens, then moved to intercept Khalil before he left. Congratulations, Khalil said warmly when Dr. Harmon reached him. You can return to your classroom tomorrow. Thanks to your support and wisdom throughout this process, Dr. Harmon replied. Will you continue with the Saturday sessions now that the immediate crisis has passed? Of course, Khalil said without hesitation. Our work there has just begun. A smile touched his eyes. Besides, it's good to be teaching again, even informally. As they parted, Dr. Harmon reflected on the strange sequence of events that had brought them to this point. What had begun as an unwelcome interruption to his classroom routine had evolved into a profound reassessment of his approach to science education and a meaningful collaboration with a colleague he would never have encountered within traditional academic channels. Tomorrow he would return to his classroom, but not as the same teacher who had left it. The experience had transformed his understanding of both science and education, revealing the artificial nature of the boundaries he had previously accepted without question. As he drove home through the quiet streets of Riverside, Dr. Harmon found himself looking forward to the next day's classes with a renewed sense of purpose. The controversy had been painful, but it had also created an opening, a chance to model for his students a more integrated approach to knowledge, one that honored the complex interplay of observation, interpretation, and cultural context that had shaped scientific understanding throughout human history. The resolution of his employment status wasn't an ending, but a beginning, an opportunity to bring the insights from this journey back into the formal educational system, to bridge the gap between the compartmentalized curriculum and the interconnected nature of human knowledge. It wouldn't be easy given the political sensitivities involved, but the enthusiastic response to the Saturday sessions suggested a hunger for this more holistic approach to learning. As he pulled into his driveway, Dr. Harmon's phone buzzed with a text message from Principal Foster. The superintendent wants to discuss potentially expanding the Saturday sessions into an official enrichment program. Interested? He smiled as he typed his response. Absolutely. Khalil and I were just discussing next steps. This could be the beginning of something important. The controversy had revealed fault lines in the community, certainly, but it had also illuminated a path forward, one that would require careful navigation, but promised a richer, more authentic educational experience for students and teachers alike. For the first time in years, Dr. Harmon felt he was truly living up to his calling as an educator, not just transmitting information, but fostering the kind of boundary-crossing thinking that real intellectual growth required. And it had all begun with an interruption. A janitor emptying a recycling bin at precisely the right moment to spark a transformation that was still unfolding, its ripples extending far beyond the walls of Westridge High into the wider community, and perhaps beyond. Chapter 5: Widening Circles. 6 weeks after Dr. Harmon's return to the classroom, Westridge High had settled into a new normal. The immediate controversy had subsided, though its effects continued to ripple through the school and community in subtle ways. The most visible change was the Saturday session at the Riverside Community Center, which had been officially incorporated as a district-approved enrichment program called Perspectives on Science. What had begun as an ad hoc discussion group now featured guest speakers, structured curricula, and academic credit for participating students. Attendance had stabilized at around 60 people each week, a mix of students, teachers, parents, and community members drawn by the interdisciplinary approach to knowledge. Less visible, but equally significant, were the changes in Dr. Harmon's teaching. He still covered the required curriculum, preparing students for standardized tests and college admissions, but he had found ways to incorporate historical and cultural contexts that enriched their understanding. When teaching cellular respiration, he included Ibn al-Nafis's 13th century description of pulmonary circulation. When discussing genetics, he referenced ancient breeding practices across different civilizations. When exploring neuroscience, he compared traditional Chinese meridian systems with modern nerve pathway mappings. The approach had sparked unprecedented engagement. Students who had previously approached biology as a collection of facts to memorize now saw it as a living, evolving body of knowledge shaped by diverse cultural perspectives throughout history. On this particular Tuesday morning, Dr. Harmon stood at the whiteboard, sketching a diagram of the circulatory system as his AP biology students took notes. As we've discussed, William Harvey is generally credited with discovering blood circulation in 1628, he explained. But as early as the 13th century, Ibn al-Nafis accurately described pulmonary circulation in his commentary on Ibn Sina's Canon of Medicine. His work remained untranslated into Latin until the 20th century, which is why Western science remained unaware of his contributions. Emma raised her hand. Dr. Harmon, was there any exchange of medical knowledge between Islamic and Chinese physicians during this period? I've been reading about traditional Chinese medicine, and they had their own understanding of circulation centuries before either Harvey or Ibn al-Nafis. It was exactly the kind of cross-cultural connection Dr. Harmon now encouraged. Excellent question, Emma. The Silk Road facilitated exchange of goods and ideas between these civilizations, though direct medical knowledge transfer is less documented than other aspects. Perhaps that could be a research topic for someone interested in the history of medicine. As the discussion continued, Dr. Harmon noticed a figure standing in the doorway. Superintendent Davis, accompanied by a woman he didn't recognize. He maintained his composure, continuing the lesson while wondering about the purpose of this unannounced visit. When the bell rang, students gathered their materials, many continuing their conversations as they filed out. Jamal paused at Dr. Harmon's desk. Dr. H, for the Saturday session on neuroscience, could we include something about how different cultures have understood consciousness? My dad suggested some interesting Islamic perspectives that might complement the scientific models. That sounds valuable, Dr. Harmon agreed. Write up a proposal and we'll discuss it with Mr. Nawaz and Dr. Fawaz. After Jamal left, Superintendent Davis approached, the unknown woman following close behind. Dr. Harmon, he said with formal politeness, that was an interesting lesson. Thank you, Superintendent. Dr. Harmon gestured to the diagram still on the whiteboard. We were discussing the historical development of our understanding of circulation. So I gathered. The superintendent's expression revealed little. I'd like to introduce Dr. Victoria Morales from the State Department of Education. She's been reviewing our district's science curriculum as part of a statewide assessment. Dr. Morales extended her hand. A pleasure to meet you, Dr. Harmon. I've heard quite a bit about your innovative approach. Her emphasis on innovative carried an ambiguity that put Dr. Harmon on alert. He'd encountered enough educational bureaucracy to recognize when he was being evaluated, even informally. I try to give students a comprehensive understanding of scientific concepts, including their historical development across different cultures, he explained carefully. Yes, I've reviewed the materials from your Perspectives on Science program. Dr. Morales smiled, though it didn't quite reach her eyes. It's certainly unusual to see a public school district embracing such cross-disciplinary content. Superintendent Davis cleared his throat. Dr. Morales will be attending Saturday's session as part of her assessment. She's particularly interested in how the program balances cultural perspectives with standard scientific curriculum. The subtext was clear. The controversy had reached beyond the local school board to state-level attention. Dr. Harmon maintained his professional demeanor, though internally he felt a familiar tension returning. We welcome Dr. Morales' participation, he said. This week's session focuses on historical approaches to astronomy across different civilizations: Mayan, Egyptian, Greek, Chinese, and Islamic. It should provide a good example of our interdisciplinary methodology. I look forward to it, Dr. Morales replied, her expression revealing nothing of her expectations or biases. After they departed, Dr. Harmon remained at his desk, contemplating this new development. The state's involvement raised the stakes considerably. What had begun as a local controversy could now potentially impact educational policy more broadly. He pulled out his phone to text Khalil. State Department of Education representative attending Saturday. Evaluating our program. Might need to be particularly careful about maintaining academic focus. Khalil's reply came quickly. Thank you for the warning. Perhaps this is an opportunity rather than a threat. If she sees genuine educational value, it could help legitimize our approach beyond Riverside. Dr. Harmon smiled at Khalil's characteristic optimism. Over the past weeks, their professional collaboration had deepened into friendship, each bringing complementary perspectives to the program they'd built together. Where Dr. Harmon sometimes saw institutional obstacles, Khalil often perceived potential bridges. Where Khalil occasionally drifted toward philosophical exploration, Dr. Harmon provided empirical grounding. You're right, of course, he texted back. Let's make sure Saturday's session showcases the best of what we're trying to accomplish. That evening, Dr. Layla Fawaz's living room had been transformed into an informal planning committee. Dr. Harmon and Khalil sat with her around a coffee table covered with books, articles, and handwritten notes, finalizing the structure for Saturday's session on cross-cultural astronomy. The Mayan astronomical calculations were remarkably precise, Dr. Fawaz noted, examining a diagram of the ancient calendar system. Their prediction of solar eclipses achieved accuracy comparable to modern calculations, despite having no telescopes or advanced mathematics as we understand it. Is similar to the ancient Egyptians using the heliacal rising of Sirius to predict the Nile flooding, Khalil added. Different methodologies, but achieving practical results that serve their civilization's needs. Dr. Harmon nodded, making notes on his laptop. I think that's a key point we should emphasize. How different cultures developed observational techniques tailored to their specific environmental and social contexts, yet many arrived at similar astronomical insights, which challenges the Eurocentric narrative that scientific progress followed a linear path from Greece to Renaissance Europe, Dr. Fawaz said. Exactly. Dr. Harmon looked up from his notes. But we need to be careful about how we frame this. The state education representative will be attending, and we don't want to give the impression that we're prioritizing cultural relativism over scientific accuracy. It's not about relativism, Khalil countered gently. It's about acknowledging the plurality of scientific traditions and how they've contributed to our current understanding. That's historically accurate, not ideologically driven. Dr. Fawaz nodded in agreement. Perhaps we should explicitly address the epistemological question, how different cultures have approached the gathering and validation of knowledge, not to suggest that all methods are equally valid for all purposes, but to examine how different approaches have contributed valuable insights. Dr. Harmon considered this, appreciating the nuance. That's a helpful framing. It acknowledges diverse contributions without dismissing the methodological rigor that characterizes modern science. Their discussion continued late into the evening, refining the presentation to balance historical accuracy, cultural respect, and scientific integrity. When they finally adjourned, Dr. Harmon felt confident they had crafted a session that would demonstrate the educational value of their interdisciplinary approach, even to a potentially skeptical state representative. As he drove home, his phone rang. The caller ID showed Emma Chen. Dr. Harmon, she began without preamble when he answered. I think you should know about something happening online. What is it, Emma? Someone started a YouTube channel called Science versus Faith, the Westridge Controversy. They've uploaded edited clips from our Saturday sessions, along with commentary saying we're trying to Islamize science education. Dr. Harmon sighed, unsurprised but disappointed. How much traction is it getting? It only has about 300 views, but it's being shared in some local Facebook groups. My mom saw it and told me. Thank you for letting me know. Try not to worry too much about it. After hanging up, Dr. Harmon reflected on the irony of the situation. Their program had been meticulously designed to present diverse perspectives within a scholarly framework, explicitly avoiding theological claims in favor of historical and cultural analysis. Yet this nuance was precisely what got lost in the polarized discourse of social media, where complex ideas were reduced to simplistic battles between competing worldviews. The timing was particularly concerning given Dr. Morales' upcoming visit. If she approached the session with preconceptions shaped by such misrepresentations, it could color her evaluation of the entire program. When he arrived home, Dr. Harmon found himself too restless to sleep. Instead, he opened his laptop and began typing an email to Principal Foster, Superintendent Davis, and the school board, outlining what they'd accomplished with the Perspectives on Science program over the past 6 weeks. He included data on student engagement, testimonials from parents, and preliminary results showing improved performance on science assessments among participating students. It was nearly midnight when he finally sent the email, adding a brief note about the YouTube channel Emma had mentioned, not to draw undue attention to it, but to ensure that district leadership had accurate information about how their program was being characterized in some corners of the internet. As he finally prepared for bed, his phone buzzed with an unexpected text from Principal Foster. Just saw your email. Don't worry about the YouTube nonsense. The program's results speak for themselves. The students' enthusiasm and improved engagement are more powerful than any online criticism. Get some rest. You're doing important work. The message provided a measure of reassurance. Whatever challenges lay ahead with the state evaluation, they had built something of genuine educational value that was already making a difference in students' lives. Saturday morning arrived with perfect spring weather, clear skies and mild temperatures that seemed fitting for a session on astronomy. Dr. Harmon arrived at the community center early, helping to arrange chairs and set up the digital projector for their presentation. Khalil arrived shortly after, carrying a cardboard box filled with replica astronomical instruments, an astrolabe, a quadrant, and other tools used by ancient astronomers across different civilizations. These should help make the historical methods more tangible, he explained, setting them on a display table. Dr. Fawaz's colleague at the University Museum loaned them for today's session. As they prepared, Dr. Harmon noticed Khalil seemed unusually contemplative. Everything all right? He asked. Khalil nodded slowly. I received a call yesterday from Al-Azhar University. They're establishing a new department of science and religion studies and are looking for faculty with experience in interdisciplinary education. The implications were immediately clear to Dr. Harmon. They've offered you a position? They've invited me to apply, Khalil clarified. It would mean returning to Cairo, to academic life. Dr. Harmon felt a complex mixture of emotions: happiness for his friend's opportunity, sadness at the prospect of his departure, concern for the program they'd built together. That's wonderful news, he said sincerely. You deserve to be back in a classroom, shaping young minds. It's only a possibility at this point, Khalil cautioned, and there is much to consider. My daughter has established her medical practice here. My grandchildren are in American schools. And then there is... He gestured to the room around them. In this work we've begun. Before Dr. Harmon could respond, the first participants began arriving, including Emma and Jamal, who immediately approached to help set up the remaining materials. Soon the room was filling with familiar faces, regular attendees who had embraced the interdisciplinary exploration of scientific knowledge. At precisely 10 o'clock, Dr. Morales entered, accompanied by Superintendent Davis. She carried a notebook and moved directly to a seat in the middle row, her posture suggesting she was here to evaluate rather than participate. Dr. Harmon exchanged a glance with Khalil, who gave a subtle nod of reassurance. They had prepared thoroughly. Now it was time to demonstrate the educational value of their approach. Dr. Fawaz opened the session with a brief overview of how different civilizations had developed astronomical knowledge based on their specific geographic, cultural, and social contexts. She moved fluidly between descriptions of Mayan observation platforms, Egyptian star charts, Greek geometric models, Chinese celestial maps, and Islamic astronomical instruments, highlighting both the differences in methodology and the remarkable similarities in many of their conclusions. Then Khalil stepped forward, displaying and explaining the replica instruments, how an astrolabe functioned, how ancient astronomers used quadrants for measurement, how different civilizations track celestial movements without modern technology. What's particularly remarkable, he noted, is how these diverse traditions often arrived at similar conclusions through different methodological paths. The Islamic astronomer al-Biruni calculated the Earth's circumference in the 11th century with an error of only 10.44 miles from the modern measurement, using geometry and observation. The ancient Greeks reached similar conclusions through different methods, as did Chinese astronomers of the period. Dr. Harmon then took the lead, connecting these historical approaches to modern astronomical understanding. He projected images from the Hubble and James Webb telescopes alongside ancient star charts, discussing both the continuities and the revolutionary advances in our understanding of the cosmos. Science progresses through both revolution and evolution, he explained. Revolutionary insights change our fundamental understanding, while evolutionary developments refine and extend existing knowledge. Both processes have occurred across cultures throughout human history, though we often focus only on the revolutionary moments in Western scientific tradition. Throughout the presentation, he observed Dr. Morales taking copious notes, her expression revealing neither approval nor criticism. The audience, however, was visibly engaged, asking questions, making connections, participating in the hands-on demonstrations with the replica instruments. During the break midway through the session, Emma approached Dr. Morales directly. "What do you think of our program?" she asked with characteristic directness. "Is this the kind of interdisciplinary education the state is looking to support?" Dr. Morales seemed taken aback by the student's forwardness, but recovered quickly. "I'm still evaluating, young lady, but I'm curious, what has this approach meant for your own understanding of science?" "It's changed everything," Emma replied without hesitation. "Before, I saw science as a collection of facts to memorize for tests. Now I understand it as a human endeavor that spans cultures and centuries. It's made me more curious about both the what and the why of scientific discovery." Dr. Morales nodded thoughtfully. "And has it affected your performance in standard curriculum assessments?" "I got the highest score in our class on the last standardized practice test," Emma said with justified pride. "Understanding the historical context actually helps me remember the scientific concepts better, because they're connected to stories and people, not just abstract ideas." From across the room, Dr. Harmon observed this exchange with interest. Emma had articulated exactly what they'd hoped to achieve: deeper engagement with scientific concepts through contextual understanding, improving rather than detracting from performance on traditional assessments. As the session resumed, Jamal led a practical demonstration, guiding participants through the process of tracking celestial movements using methods from different historical traditions. The room buzzed with activity as people worked in small groups, comparing approaches and results. Ancient astronomers across civilizations recognized that understanding the heavens required systematic observation over time, Jamal explained with remarkable poise for a high school student. They developed methodologies suited to their cultural and geographic contexts, but all were engaged in the fundamental scientific practice of gathering empirical data to identify patterns and make predictions. When the 3-hour session finally concluded, participants lingered as usual, continuing discussions and examining the replica instruments more closely. Dr. Morales approached the front, where Dr. Harmon, Khalil, and Dr. Fawaz were gathering their materials. "That was quite illuminating," she said, her professional demeanor revealing little of her assessment. "I'd like to speak with the three of you more formally next week if possible. My preliminary report to the State Board is due by Friday." "Of course," Dr. Harmon replied. "We're available at your convenience." After she departed with Superintendent Davis, Dr. Fawaz exhaled audibly. "Well, that was intense. Do you think she was impressed or skeptical?" "Hard to tell," Dr. Harmon admitted. "Educational bureaucrats are trained to maintain poker faces." "She was engaged," Khalil observed. "She took detailed notes and asked thoughtful questions during the break. Whether she approves of our approach remains to be seen, but she was genuinely interested in understanding it." As they continued discussing the session and Dr. Morales' possible reactions, Emma and Jamal approached with several other students. "We have an idea for expanding the program," Emma announced. "What if we created educational videos based on these sessions? Not just recordings, but produced content with animations and graphics to explain the concepts. We could reach people beyond Riverside," Jamal added enthusiastically. "Create a resource for students and teachers anywhere who are interested in this interdisciplinary approach." Dr. Harmon shared a smile with Khalil and Dr. Fawaz. This was exactly the kind of student initiative they had hoped to inspire. Young people taking ownership of their education and finding ways to share knowledge more broadly. "That's an excellent idea," he encouraged them. "Why don't you draft a proposal and we can discuss the logistics at our next planning meeting?" As the students huddled together, already brainstorming, Khalil remarked quietly, "This is how knowledge has always grown, passed from one generation to the next, adapted and expanded by fresh minds with new perspectives." "Speaking of which," Dr. Fawaz said, turning to Khalil, "Richard mentioned the possibility of a position at Al-Azhar. Are you seriously considering it?" Khalil's expression grew thoughtful. "I am. It would be a return to my academic roots, a chance to bring what we've learned here to a different context. We would miss your contributions terribly," she said, "but I understand the pull of such an opportunity." Dr. Harmon nodded in agreement, though the prospect of continuing the program without Khalil's wisdom and perspective seemed daunting. Their collaboration had become central to the initiative's success, each bringing complementary strengths to their shared educational vision. As they finished packing up, Principal Foster arrived, having missed the session due to a district meeting. "How did it go with Dr. Morales?" she asked without preamble. "Professionally," Dr. Harmon replied. "She was attentive but reserved in her reactions. We'll know more when we meet with her next week." "Well, I have some news that might impact her evaluation," Principal Foster said. "The district just received the latest standardized test results. Students who've been participating in your Saturday sessions showed a statistically significant improvement in science scores compared to non-participants, controlling for prior achievement levels." Dr. Harmon exchanged a surprised glance with Khalil. They had hoped their approach would deepen engagement with scientific concepts, but measurable improvement on standardized assessments this quickly was unexpected. "That's remarkable," Dr. Fawaz commented. "It suggests that contextualizing scientific knowledge within its historical and cultural development actually enhances rather than detracts from core content mastery." "Exactly," Principal Foster agreed, "which makes it much harder for critics to argue that your approach is a distraction from real science education." She smiled slightly. "I've already forwarded these results to Dr. Morales. Let's see how she incorporates them into her evaluation." As they left the community center together, Dr. Harmon felt a renewed sense of purpose. What had begun as a controversial classroom interruption had evolved into an educational approach with demonstrable benefits, not just in the subjective engagement of students, but in the objective metrics that educational bureaucracies valued. Walking to the parking lot, he and Khalil fell into step together, their shared journey having created a friendship that transcended their different backgrounds and paths. "What will you do about the Al-Azhar position?" Dr. Harmon asked gently. Khalil gazed at the clear spring sky, considering the question. "I don't know yet. There is important work to be done here. The ripples from our small beginning are still spreading. They would continue spreading even if you returned to Cairo," Dr. Harmon assured him. "What we've started here has taken on a life of its own. Perhaps," Khalil smiled thoughtfully, "or perhaps the ripples are meant to expand in multiple directions simultaneously. Here through your continued leadership, and in Egypt through what I might bring back from this experience." They reached their cars, pausing before parting ways. "Whatever you decide," Dr. Harmon said sincerely, "know that you've fundamentally changed how I understand both science and education. That transformation will continue to shape my teaching, regardless of where your path leads." Khalil nodded, genuine emotion in his eyes. "As you have changed my understanding of how knowledge can bridge divides rather than create them. Some interruptions, it seems, are divine appointments in disguise." As Dr. Harmon drove home, he reflected on this characterization. Whether one viewed such pivotal moments through a religious lens as divine appointments or through a secular perspective as fortuitous coincidences, the outcome remained the same. An unexpected interaction had catalyzed profound change, not just in their individual lives, but in an expanding circle of students, colleagues, and community members. The YouTube critics, the board politics, even the state evaluation seemed small concerns compared to the fundamental shift in understanding that was occurring. Something authentic and valuable had been set in motion, an educational approach that honored the complex, interconnected nature of human knowledge and the diverse paths through which it had developed across cultures and centuries. Whatever challenges lay ahead, that core insight would continue to ripple outward, touching minds and lives in ways they had only begun to glimpse. Chapter 6, Full Circle. 1 year later, the auditorium of Westridge High School was filled to capacity, with additional chairs hastily arranged along the back wall to accommodate the overflow crowd. On stage, a large screen displayed the title, "Perspectives on Science, Bridging Cultures and Disciplines," above a panel of speakers who represented an unlikely educational alliance. Dr. Richard Harmon sat at the center of the panel, flanked by Dr. Layla Fawaz, Principal Foster, and Dr. Victoria Morales from the State Department of Education. A fifth chair remained conspicuously empty, a placard with Professor Khalil Nawaz, Al-Azhar University, via video, placed before it. In the front row, Emma Chen and Jamal Washington sat with notebooks open, occasionally exchanging whispered comments as they prepared to moderate the question and answer session that would follow the presentations. "Welcome to the first annual conference on interdisciplinary science education," Principal Foster began, addressing the assembled educators, students, and community members. What began as a controversial classroom discussion in this very school has evolved into an educational model that is now being implemented in districts across our state. She gestured to the panel beside her. "Today, we're honored to share what we've learned through this journey, the measurable impacts we've documented, and the future directions for this approach to science education." Dr. Harmon surveyed the audience, recognizing faces from multiple school districts, university education departments, and even a few national education journalists. The controversy that had once threatened his career had ultimately created an opening for educational innovation that was drawing attention far beyond Riverside. When it was his turn to speak, he approached the podium with the confidence of someone who had found his true educational calling. "A little over a year ago," he began, "a maintenance worker interrupted my biology lesson to empty the recycling bin. What followed was a conversation that fundamentally changed my understanding of both science and education." He described the initial confrontation, the science club discussion that followed, and the community sessions that had grown from that beginning. He shared data showing the impact on student engagement and achievement, not just in science, but across disciplines as students learned to make connections between seemingly separate domains of knowledge. "What we discovered," he concluded, "was that presenting science within its historical and cultural context doesn't dilute scientific understanding, it enriches it. Students grasp concepts more deeply when they see how those concepts developed across different civilizations and time periods. They engage more authentically when science is presented not as a fixed body of facts, but as a human endeavor spanning cultures and centuries." As he returned to his seat, Dr. Morales took the podium. Her initial skepticism had transformed into advocacy after her evaluation revealed the program's educational benefits. The State Board of Education has approved Perspectives on Science as an officially recognized enrichment curriculum, she announced. Districts across the state can now implement this interdisciplinary approach with full institutional support. Furthermore, we're developing training programs for teachers who wish to incorporate these methodologies into their standard curriculum. A ripple of excitement moved through the audience, particularly among educators who had been following the program's development with interest. But perhaps the most exciting development, Dr. Morales continued, is the international collaboration that has emerged from this local initiative. She gestured to the screen behind her, which now displayed a live video feed from Cairo. Khalil Nawaz appeared, sitting in an office adorned with both traditional Islamic calligraphy and modern scientific diagrams. A visual representation of the bridge between cultures he continued to build. "Greetings from Al-Azhar University," Khalil said, his familiar voice filling the auditorium. "I wish I could be with you in person, but I'm pleased to join virtually for this important conversation." Over the past year, Khalil had accepted the position at Al-Azhar, establishing a new department focused on the historical relationship between Islamic scholarship and scientific development. He had maintained his connection with the Riverside program through monthly video sessions and collaborative curriculum development. "What began in a classroom in Riverside has found resonance here in Cairo," he explained. "Our students are exploring how scientific knowledge has flowed between civilizations throughout history, challenging the artificial boundaries we often place between cultures and disciplines." As Khalil described the parallel program he had developed at Al-Azhar, Dr. Harmon felt a profound sense of fulfillment. Their collaboration had transcended not only disciplinary boundaries but geographical and cultural ones as well, creating educational approaches that honored the interconnected nature of human knowledge across diverse traditions. When the presentations concluded, Emma and Jamal took the stage to moderate the question and answer session. Their poise and articulateness reflected their growth over the past year. Both had become regional science fair winners with their project on cross-cultural scientific development, and both had received early acceptance to prestigious universities. "We'll now open the floor for questions," Emma announced. "But first, we'd like to share something special we've created for this conference." Jamal clicked a remote and the screen displayed the title, "Knowledge Without Borders, a Student-Led Documentary." Over the past year, he explained, students from Westridge High and from Al-Azhar University in Cairo have collaborated to create this documentary examining how scientific knowledge has developed and flowed between civilizations throughout history. The lights dimmed and the documentary began playing, a professionally produced exploration of scientific development across cultures, featuring interviews with scientists, historians, and educators from multiple countries. The student creators had beautifully captured the essence of what the Perspectives on Science program sought to achieve, a recognition of how human understanding had evolved through contributions from diverse civilizations, each building upon and transforming the insights of others. When the documentary concluded, the audience erupted in applause. Questions followed from educators eager to implement similar approaches in their own schools, from university professors interested in research collaboration, and from community members curious about how this educational model might expand further. Throughout the session, Dr. Harmon noticed a figure standing quietly at the back of the auditorium. Tom Reynolds, the new maintenance supervisor who had replaced Khalil in that role. As the conference concluded and people began to mingle, Tom approached the stage. "Dr. Harmon," he said, extending his hand, "that was quite impressive. I've been curious about this program since I started working here, seeing how students talk about it in the hallways." "Thank you," Dr. Harmon replied, shaking his hand. "Would you be interested in attending one of our Saturday sessions? We always welcome new perspectives." Tom nodded thoughtfully. "I might just do that. Before I took this job, I taught environmental science at a community college in Oregon. I've been missing those classroom discussions." Dr. Harmon felt a smile spreading across his face as he recognized another example of hidden knowledge and experience within the school's walls. "In that case, we'd especially value your input. Perhaps you'd even consider sharing your expertise in a future session?" As they exchanged contact information, Dr. Harmon reflected on how his own perspective had shifted over the past year. Before his encounter with Khalil, he might have made assumptions about a maintenance worker's educational background or intellectual contributions. Now he recognized the artificial nature of such hierarchies and the potential for meaningful exchange across traditional boundaries. The conference gradually wound down, participants departing with new ideas and connections. As Dr. Harmon gathered his materials, his phone buzzed with a message from Khalil. "The ripples continue to spread, my friend. Our universities have approved the Joint Certificate Program in History and Philosophy of Science. Students from Riverside and Cairo will be able to study together virtually, sharing perspectives across continents." Another boundary dissolves. Dr. Harmon typed his reply, "Amazing news. As someone once told me, some interruptions are divine appointments in disguise." Later that evening, Dr. Harmon stood in his empty classroom, preparing materials for the next day's lesson. The space looked much the same as it had a year ago. The same desks, the same whiteboard, the same scientific posters on the walls. Yet everything about how he approached teaching within these walls had fundamentally changed. His biology curriculum still covered cellular structures, genetic inheritance, evolutionary processes, and ecological systems. But now these topics were presented within their rich historical and cultural contexts, acknowledging how understanding had developed through contributions from diverse civilizations and traditions. On his desk sat a framed photograph from the previous summer, a group shot taken during his visit to Cairo, where he had spent 2 weeks collaborating with Khalil on the joint university program. In the image, they stood together on the Al-Azhar campus, two educators from different backgrounds united by a shared commitment to breaking down the artificial boundaries that separated domains of knowledge. A knock on the doorframe interrupted his reflection. Emma stood in the doorway, a manila envelope in her hands. "Sorry to disturb you, Dr. Harmon, but I wanted to share some news before tomorrow's class." Her expression held barely contained excitement. "Come in, Emma. What's happened?" She handed him the envelope. "I just received this. It's the official acceptance to the summer research program at the History of Science Institute in London. I'll be studying the transmission of medical knowledge between Islamic and European physicians during the Renaissance." Dr. Harmon felt a surge of pride as he examined the acceptance letter. "This is extraordinary, Emma. Congratulations. I couldn't have done it without you and Professor Nawaz," she said. "Before your class, I never would have considered combining history and science this way. I always thought they were separate subjects with different methodologies. That artificial separation has limited scientific education for generations," Dr. Harmon acknowledged. "Breaking down those boundaries is perhaps the most important lesson we can teach." After Emma left, Dr. Harmon turned off the classroom lights and prepared to leave. As he reached the door, he paused, looking back at the space where an unexpected interaction had set in motion changes that continued to ripple outward in ever-widening circles. The controversy had faded, as controversies eventually do, but the fundamental insights it had revealed remained vibrant and generative. That knowledge does not exist in isolated compartments, that understanding deepens when we recognize its interconnected nature, and that sometimes the most valuable educational moments begin with an interruption to our carefully planned lessons. In the quiet classroom, Dr. Harmon recalled the embryology slide that had been displayed on the screen that fateful day, an image of human development that Khalil had recognized from a different knowledge tradition than his own. That moment of recognition across seemingly separate domains had opened a door to a more integrated approach to understanding, not just for the two of them, but for an expanding circle of students, educators, and communities on opposite sides of the world. As he finally turned to leave, Dr. Harmon reflected on the journey that had brought him to this point, from confident certainty in his scientific worldview to a more humble appreciation for the multiple paths through which human understanding had developed across cultures and centuries. It was, he realized, the most profound education he had ever received. And it had all begun with a janitor emptying a recycling bin. Wow, what a story. And there is more coming. Don't forget to subscribe to not miss a new stories.